Pray for our church. But know this, we pray for you every day. You are who we're here to serve.
Brett Farmer, the senior minister at the West Freeway Church of Christ in the town of White Settlement, says the gunman, Keith Kanunen, visited the church prior to the shooting on Sunday. And the gunman fatally shot Tony Wallace and Richard White seconds before a third church member, Jack Wilson, opened fire, killing him. In New York, Hanukkah suspect Grafton Thomas faces more charges. Fox's Evan Brown says prosecutors charged Thomas with federal hate crimes.
His defense attorney, Michael Sussman, says he's mentally ill, as evidenced by discovered written rants at his home.
There is no suggestion in any of those ramblings and pages of writing of an anti-Semitic motive.
But it comes as Orthodox Jews have been targeted around greater New York for a month, like in parts of Brooklyn.
If I was a Jewish resident of this city right now, I too would be alarmed.
Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams. Recent developments ramp up calls for witnesses to testify at the Senate impeachment trial.
Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer is calling for witnesses to testify and documents be subpoenaed as part of a Senate impeachment trial. Schumer says new reporting by the New York Times detailing high-level conversations about withholding Ukrainian aid is a game changer.
Fox's Jared Halpern reporting from Washington. America's listening to Fox News.
When you think about better water, think Kinetico softened water. Kinetico water conditioners work like no other, supplying a continuous flow of luxuriously soft water without disruption and without use of electricity. After all, better water flows from better thinking. Kinetico.
American Water Tech, a passion for improving lives through better water. Call American Water Tech at 649-2301 or email info@americanwatertech.com.
Hafa Adai Tritons. This is Chelsea St-Nicholas, president of the UOG Alumni Association. I made some of the best memories during my time as a Triton. Because of this, I have committed to giving back to the G is for Giving campaign, which will help student scholarships, programs, and activities. And I encourage you all to do the same. To make a tax-deductible donation, log on to give.uog.edu by December 31st or call 735-2957.
Viva UOG!
An Iranian-backed militia is vowing revenge for the U.S. rocket attack on its members in Iraq. The Trump administration approved the strike in retaliation for last week's attack that killed an American contractor.
In all, 5 targets in Iraq and Syria were hit by the U.S. on Sunday. Targets controlled by an Iran-backed militia. The strikes hit 3 locations in Iraq, 2 others in Syria. And while a U.S. response to an attack that kills Americans is not uncommon, Sunday's retaliation targeting Iranian proxies has renewed concerns of a possible escalation of hostilities, one that could lead to a proxy war with Iran or worse.
Fox's Kevin Corke at the White House. Outgoing BP executive Bob Dudley says that climate change fears have driven his daughter's friends to antidepressants. The Times of London reports that Dudley says he hates seeing them so unhappy and so anxious. Federal numbers show U.S. population growth is not as fast as recent years.
The numbers were released by the U.S. Census Bureau just months before its decennial population count is to begin. The findings point to 3 main factors: declining births, increasing deaths, and fewer people migrating to our shores. That dropped by almost 600,000. The 0.5% of population growth, officials say, is the slowest in about a century, around the time of World War I. Looking at the trends on the state level, 4 states from 2018 to 2019 had more people who died than were born. That's called a natural decrease. 10 states saw their populations drop overall. Gernal Scott, Fox News.
And 4 Amish men busted in Michigan for drinking while driving their horse and buggy. Gladwin County deputies say that all of them were underage drinkers and that they were caught tossing beer cans out of the buggy. This is Fox News.
We understand what matters to you because at Docomo Pacific, we're a family too. With the Now Family program, mom, dad, and kids stay connected on the latest devices the whole family can enjoy. For just $155 a month, get 3 lines with 30 gigs of 4G LTE data each. and endless use of your favorite apps without affecting your monthly data bucket. Add more, get more, save more. Docomo Pacific, better together. Some conditions apply.
Sheraton Laguna Guam invites you to their New Year's Eve festivities. Celebrate New Year's Eve with dinner at La Cascada featuring a delectable feast complemented with bottomless beer and free-flowing wines from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. Traditional soba noodles with shrimp tempura at the lobby from 10 p.m. till midnight. And glow-in-the-dark New Year's Eve countdown party at their infinity pool from 9:30 p.m. to 12:30 a.m. For reservations and information on these events, please call Sheraton Laguna at 646-2222.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific, banking on the Pacific for 65 years.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of our free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Right, Real Joe Cruz?
And how, sir?
You know, Tall Tales is very thorough. Whenever we examine something, we examine it to a fairly well. So given the fact that we are so thorough here on Tall Tales, it's probably going to take us the rest of the year to finish up this broadcast, Real Joe Cruz.
I agree, sir.
Yeah. Do you have it on your schedule?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So everybody out there in our international radio listening audience, we'll be here for the rest of 2019. Let's start out here, Real Joe Cruz, with Jemmy Ikotny. And this is that part of the program where I unmercifully criticize the Pacific Daily News for not running local editorials, shift from there to the Guam Post, and usually, not always, but often, award the Guam Post the Blue Star for having the better of the two editorials, which isn't saying much, given that there's almost no competition from the Daily News. Post, however, ordinarily writes some pretty edgy editorials, so we like it. And we got a newcomer in the game here. Just at the end of this year, we saw a media outlet that doesn't even own a printing press get the Blue Star 3 times, and that would be Candid News. So here we go with today's Jemmy Ikotny. We start out with the Daily News, and it's titled "Experienced Diplomats Getting Trump Treatment." And it's by Stephen Kashket, Specialty USA Today. That's all I'm going to read. That tells you everything you need to know. It's not about Guam. It's going to bash Trump, so, you know, you don't have to be a speed reader to read these things because they never say much. And then we shift to the Post. Some lessons Guam can learn from 2019. As we bid goodbye to 2019, some of the major stories that troubled our island can be used as lessons as we welcome the new year. One of the best things about ushering in 2020 is that it allows our island community to reset. I should have a reset button back here on camera, you know, so that I could, sometimes when callers call in, I'd like to reset. Okay, so we can be better neighbors to look after the community's safety. We can be givers to the less fortunate with what we can spare. We can teach our kids good behavior. For elected officials, The new year offers a chance to prioritize the public good and not what makes their chances of getting reelected look good. Here are a few suggestions. Addressing drugs and crimes. We need to get law enforcers the support they need, such as training and more funding for equipment and personnel. Local and federal cooperation is crucial. Turf differences must be set aside. So local and federal cooperation is crucial. Turf differences must be set aside. I guess that's we demonstrate that by having local officials come out and say that enforcement of the new federal cruelty to animals law is our lowest priority. That's really setting turf battles aside, isn't it? Going on, addressing succession in public offices. While Jonia Mayor Jesse Mendiola Blas awaits his day in court in the federal bribery case against him, his situation spotlights a power vacuum when an elected office doesn't have a succession mechanism in place. And we don't mean adding a new position to the GovGuam payroll. We mean establishing a system so it's clear who takes over and constituents aren't left without someone to represent and serve them. Well, I've offered my own solution on that already, and that is that the Guam Election Commission could have declared the office vacant and could have called, well, actually the other way around. The Guam Election Commission could have called for a special election after declaring the office vacant. And there is a gap filler in the government code that says whenever an office is vacant and there's no other provision to fill it, the governor fills it. So a diligent approach to using the laws we already have would have remedied that situation. But when it comes to the Election Commission always does the right thing. Not the correct thing, but the right thing. So if there's a call to be made, should we do a recount or not? Oh no, let's not do a recount. Why? Give us a minute. We'll come up with the reasons. Should we get on somebody for campaign law violations? Oh no. Why not? Well, let me talk with counsel. We'll find a reason. So we saw that going through. The David Cruz. David Cruz as a candidate, John Fernandez as one interfering with the electoral process. We saw all of that. We saw Troy Choris make a complaint with the Election Commission, just blew off. And we saw them very quickly tell you there's nothing we can do about the fact that Jesse Blas is in jail and not functioning as the mayor of Jonia. Next item on the list, establishing tougher measures to compel government officials and public employees to adhere to certain higher standards in public office. The bid rigging charges against University of Guam professor Thomas Marler, the sexual conviction of another former UOG professor, Michael Ellert, the Jonia mayor's bribery case highlight the need for a moral and ethical test for those who get elected or hired into positions of power in the government of Guam. The Guam Ethics Commission ought to serve as an effective watchdog. Hello, Guam Ethics Commission has started off on a terribly bad step. A Freedom of Information Act was sent to them asking for a public document, that being the budget that they had sent to the governor, and they came back and said, oh, we're not going to send that to you. It's just a draft. Well, if it was just a draft, why did you send it to the governor? So this is extremely important, because we would expect the Ethics Commission to be the paragon of virtue. So if there is any kind of a call that deals with transparency, open government law, or sunshine law, even if they have an argument, even if they could present an argument that says, no, we don't have to give you those papers, they should just do it. They should say, we are the Ethics Commission. If there's anything that comes before us, we're going to meet the highest ethical standard, not look around for some technical excuse to avoid following the law. We are the Ethics Commission. Maybe they could maybe they could hire the poet laureate of Tall Tales, Andrew, to draft them up a limerick. Andrew, what do you think? Would we do that? Draft them up a limerick so that whenever they come across a matter where they have to make a decision, they could recite that limerick just to reflect their recollection, refresh their recollection as to what they're about. They're the Ethics Commission, not the Excuses Commission, or the We'll Do That Later Commission, or We've Got a Good Excuse so we're not going to do it Commission. So, yeah, unfortunately, we learned that lesson already. And I'm not surprised because, you know, the first thing the Ethics Commission told one of the newspapers, well, we were sworn in September, and we found out we didn't have any budget. So what are we going to do? We'll just have to sit around and say, well, there's nothing we can do. We don't have a budget. When ethical people, upon being sworn in, would have said, fall in, cover down, let's march to the governor's office and let's start pounding on the table. Governor, give us a budget. Give us some money so that we can start performing our function. We are the Ethics Commission, not the put it off until later commission. The Ethics Commission ought to serve as an effective watchdog. The Guam Office of Accountability and the Guam Attorney General's Office can do better in actively pursuing investigations involving tips on possible white-collar crimes. Guam's laws need to be tougher against those who violate the law by holding secret meetings. CCU, are you listening this afternoon? Secret meetings? Especially when improving pay raises and bonus, as was the case with the meetings at Guam Water Works Authority and Guam Power Authority that benefited their top managers and lawyers. So, once again, here's a little advice for anybody sitting on a board or commission. Every time somebody says the words executive session, your ears must perk up. And you must say, time out, hold on, stop the presses, wait a minute. I want to be absolutely clear as to why we're going into executive session, and I want chapter and verse of the law that gives us the authority to go into the executive session. And if you don't give that to me, I'm on the phone to the Attorney General, because anyone who knowingly participates in a meeting that violates the open government law commits a misdemeanor. And I'm not going to commit any misdemeanors just because you don't want, just because you want me to, quote, be a nice guy. Oh, come on, be a nice guy. Just go along with this. We've always done it this way. So the words ethics, as you were, executive session, boards and commissioners, write yourself a note that says executive session is dangerous. And don't ever go into executive session unless you're absolutely sure why you're doing it, how it must be done, and that the law permits it. Okay, revamping the leadership and oversight of Guam Memorial Hospital. GMH has been in a crisis for far too long. Someone needs to take ownership of the problem and start the road to meaningful reform so patient safety will no longer be placed at risk. That ought to be the director of the hospital, whatever his or her title. Oh, I made a mistake. That ought to be the director of the hospital, whatever their title is, right? And once again, the word juice comes in here. A person in charge, the administrator of the hospital, with some juice would not be content to say, yeah, we need more money, and the roof leaks, and I'd like to meet you on the 4th floor, but none of the elevators work. The person who is in charge of the hospital, once again, ought to be out pounding on doors at the legislature and at the governor's office and at the Daily News and at the Guam Post, at the PNC News and at KUAM and at Tall Tales, saying, hey, look, this is what I need to get this hospital up running right. No more of this just going along with the flow and keeping my fingers crossed, hoping that things will get better. Okay, the opinion, the editorial goes on to say, these are just some of the lessons and suggestions to foster more community dialogue. I don't know that we need more. All the dialogue that you're ever going to need, you can get right here at 4 o'clock in the afternoon every weekday. We got plenty of dialogue. In fact, better than dialogue, we have monologue. Right, Real Joe Cruz?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. And if you listen to Tall Tales every day and pay attention, you will be set on the right path to take care of these things instead of kind of tiptoeing, or kind of like the definition of the summer soldier crossing a minefield. He puts his fingers in his ears, closes his eyes and tiptoes. That's kind of how we're going through these things. Close your eyes, put your fingers in your ears, and tiptoe. So if there's an explosion, it won't scare you too much. The public can also do better by having the courage to say something when it notices something's wrong with elected officials or people who were hired to positions of authority. And one of the best things about 2020 is that it's an election year. We get to say whether the incumbent legislators keep their jobs or whether we want senators with better or new ideas or both. These suggestions are just a start. We encourage members of the public to also share their views. Email the Guam Daily Post at goodnews@postguam.com. Let's celebrate the idea with new ideas. Let's celebrate the new year with new ideas. I'd say let's celebrate the new year with some of the ideas that we've had for a long time that we know are right, but we just didn't have the courage to push forward. Part-time legislature, anybody? Okay. I don't disagree with some of the issues raised here, but once again, I think when you wrote this, you had a keyboard in front of you, but you put the hammer that I often find in your editorials, you put the hammer in the other room. So put the hammer back in your editorials. You're probably going to get more blue stars. So much for Zemi Ikotny. Now let's go to the card. And this is what I got on the card. I got another episode of Christmas Torts. I've got Tall Tales versus Chief Ignacio. I've got Nelson versus Bora. CCU versus 2020 AD. You know what AD stands for, Real Joe Cruz?
After death.
Well, a lot of people think so, but actually it means Anno Domini, in the year of our Lord. But of course, progressives hate that, so they will talk about 20 CE, meaning current era. Because if you said Anno Domini, it might offend somebody, right? It might offend the Muslims in your group, or I don't know. Anyhow, I've titled this Tall Tales versus Chief Ignacio, I've titled it CCU versus 2020 Anno Domini. Next on the list is Chotfris versus Guam Fire, Chotfris Guam versus Guam Police Department. And then I've got Animal Lives Matter versus Sabina Paris. A repeat performance of the CLTC versus Chamorros. And then Antonio Gramsci versus y'all, which I touched upon last week, but we still need to do a little more work with it. So I got a really interesting card here. What else is new? So stay with us for the rest of the year. You won't regret it. Starting out with Christmas torts for 2020, listing of holiday mishaps and madness. Some holiday celebrants end up in less than jolly surroundings. Curtis L. Metz of Illinois was charged with drunk driving after slowly evading the police by driving around a barricade and alongside a Christmas parade in Beloit, Illinois. Police did not want to conduct a chase through the parade and just arrested Metz and his passenger at the end. Metz received his 5th drunk driving charge with added charge of fleeing police, 5 counts of first-degree recklessly endangering safety. But I wonder if he got a prize from the people who put the parade on, like for having the most realistic float, a float that looked just like a drunken driver driving down the street. Okay, so we'll come back to this tomorrow. Christmas torts. And then I go to the chief of police. And you'll recall that yesterday, Chief Ignacio versus his itch was an item on the card. And there's a story in the Post that told about Chief Ignacio, a biographical story of Chief Ignacio. He came out to his carport and he noticed that the cover of his motorcycle was gone. But he didn't think too much of it. And then later that day, his neighbor told him that someone in a dark hoodie, driving a dark pickup, had been in his garage looking at his motorcycle. And Chief Ignacio thought maybe trying to steal my motorcycle. And he said he felt violated. So what did he do? He called Central Precinct and he asked that if they weren't busy, if they could conduct some routine checks on his house. And then later on, in the day, or maybe later on, period, he said, Ignacio chose to chair the incident during a command staff meeting last week, but clarified that he did not give any order for officers to do mandatory checks of his home. Oh, no, he would never think of that. Quote, I was upset and confused that people would think that as the chief, I would order police officers to do periodic checks at my house. If any officer or anybody thought they were being directed to do periodic checks because I'm the chief, nothing is farther from the truth. So what do you think? That low-ranking cop down there at, let's see here, at Central Precinct thought when he picked up the phone and said, Central Precinct Command, good afternoon, sir. This is Officer Smuckahugowitz. And then he heard this coming over the line. Smuckahugowitz, this is Chief Ignacio. If you're not too busy down there, if you have time, could you have someone do routine patrol checks on my house? Yes, sir. Yes, sir, Chief. Okay, thank you, Smuckahugowitz. Carry on. Hey, you guys! Or calling all cars. Smuckahugowitz picks up the mic. Calling all cars. Calling all cars. This is Central Precinct. Please do routine patrol checks on Chief Ignacio's house. Over. What do you Chief, what do you think the guy who answered the phone thought when you said to drive by your house and do periodic checks? Wow. So, I've had motorcycles. I don't have one anymore. I'll come back to my motorcycle right after this short break.
People come to Chili's for a million reasons. For happy hour, date night, birthdays, or just because it's Tuesday. But if you ask us what brings people into our restaurants time and time again, is that Chili's moment. You know the one. When you eat so much you want to fall asleep at the table, or when you meet up with good friends and it turns into a party. At Chili's, moments like these matter, and we want to make more of them. So there may be a million reasons to Chili's, but all you really need is one. Chili's, savor the moment in our new location in the Tumon Sands Plaza 2nd floor.
Tall Tales is brought to you by American Water Tech. You can save almost $900 on a complete Kinetico non-electric reverse osmosis drinking water system for your home. Call American Water Tech at 649-2301. To find out more, American Water Tech, a passion for improving lives through better water.
Cocoa Coffee Company is now available at Circle K. Single origin coffee beans carefully sourced and locally roasted to give you the freshest cup of coffee Guam has to offer. Grab a cup that's brewed every 30 minutes or purchase a bag of the locally roasted whole beans. Flavors now serving: light medium roasted Ethiopia and medium dark roasted Jamaican Blue Mountain. Exclusively available at Circle K. With every Cocoa Coffee Company purchase, a portion of the proceeds will go towards the Cocoa Recovery Program.
Party with us tonight at Kento's as we ring in 2020 and as we celebrate Kento's 10th anniversary. Live performances by InstaJam and Super Club, and music by DJ Daryl Lazama and Ryan the Mixologist. General admission $20, includes 2 drinks and an appetizer, champagne toast, and $500 balloon drop at midnight. Don't miss it, December 31st, Kento's at the Hyatt.
We now return to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, soaring over the confusion with his superpowers of truth. Call 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
No, I don't have a motorcycle anymore. I have had motorcycles, and when I had motorcycles, I was always a little concerned about somebody taking off with it, stealing it. Motorcycle's kind of a soft target for a thief. But it never occurred to me that I could call the nearest police precinct and say, fellas, if you have time, could you do routine checks on my house to make sure nobody steals my motorcycle? Of course, I was never chief of police. I guess that's the difference. So this is a classic example of what I refer to as public officials scratching their own itch. In other words, using their public office not in the line of duty, not to benefit the public, but to benefit themselves. So, Chief Ignacio, you not only scratched your own itch, you told the newspaper about it, and then at your meeting with your staff, it appears that you're trying to do some damage control. Kind of like maybe somebody found out that you had called Central Precinct Command and asked them to do routine checks on your house, and then you tried to come along and say, well, you know, I was upset and confused that people would think that as a chief I would order police officers to do periodic checks at my house. Why were you upset and confused? Somebody must have confronted you like I'm doing right now, Chief, saying if you're the chief of police, you shouldn't put yourself in a more favorable position with respect to crime than we're in. I suspect that's, I speculate, maybe that's why you did it. So this whole thing didn't sit very well with me. So this afternoon, I sent a little note to the chief of police. Chief Ignacio, no later than close of business, January 8, email to me all public records showing periodic checks made on your residence December 13 through December 20. Respectfully submitted, Robert Klitzkie. So he's on January 8, he's supposed to send me all the records of periodic checks made on his house. And then we'll see how this works out. But in the meantime, if you are a public official and you're using your office to scratch your itch, your own itch, I'm going to go back to the advice here from the Daily News, from the Post editorial, And I will be a prime example of that. The public can also do better by having the courage to say something when it notices something's wrong with elected officials or people who were hired to positions of authority. So when I see something wrong like that, I'm not going to ignore it. And all of those of you out there in our international radio listening audience, I hope you do the same thing. And if you have an overpowering desire to call Tall Tales and tell me about it, or post something on our Facebook page here during Tall Tales, please do. Now, talking about our Facebook page, I thought something was wrong because I hadn't seen any posts. But then I noticed there's a post from somebody named Joe Cruz. Do you know who that is?
No, sir.
It's not you.
No, I don't think so.
It's not the real Joe Cruz.
No, it's not me.
Okay. So I guess we can...
So it's working.
Yeah, I guess it's working. All right. And then... and then Andrew Camacho chimes in. It's time for the Ethics Commission to make an act of contrition. For shrinking its duty, there's no money or booty. They're sure in an awkward position. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Andrew. The poet laureate of Tall Tales comes through. Yeah, very good. And Andrew, if you have, you think anybody might be, if you suspect that there is a guy in a dark hoodie and a dark pickup cruising around in your neighborhood, let me know, and we'll call the local police precinct and ask them to do a routine checks of your premises. Thank you, Andrew. Okay, next on the card, Nelson versus Bora. Nelson versus Jesse Bora. Vice Speaker Talina Nelson has introduced a bill that would authorize and fund a recall election in Jonia to replace jailed Mayor Jesse Bora. It's about time. He's been in jail since September 16. And, for the first month or so, we had to all sit around and say, well, he's innocent until proven guilty. Yeah. The fact that the folks in Jigo don't have a mayor while he's cooling his heels in jail, well, that's unfortunate. But, let's give him the benefit of the doubt. So Nelson's bill, 259, would appropriate $23,000 to cover the cost of a recall election, the date of which will be set by the Election Commission, but as I recall, it has to be within 30 days of the passage of the bill. So the folks in Jonia will go to the polls within 30 days after that bill passes, assuming that it passes. And they will vote on the question of whether or not Jesse should be recalled. And let's see. He may be removed from office by a recall election in which at least 2/3 of the number voting for him in the last election. So in order for him to be recalled, you count the number of votes he got in the last election, and there had to be more than 2/3 that number voting for recall, and then he's out. So the recall of public officials is governed by 3 GCA section 121, as you were 1121, and subsection B says, notwithstanding the provisions of Article 3, Chapter 6, mayors and others may be removed from office by a recall petition in which at least 2/3 of the number of persons voting for such official in the past preceding election at which such official was elected vote in favor of a recall, and in which those so voting constitute a majority of all those participating in the recall election. So If that vote occurs, then Jesse Bloss is removed from office in accordance with 1123 GCA 1121. Now, let's take a look at the bill that Senator Talina Nelson introduced. Senator Talina Nelson's bill has the obligatory legislative findings and intent and the shape of the ballot. And, and it has an effective date section. This bill, the act would be effective upon enactment. Boy, it's a good thing she put that in there. Otherwise, if the bill passed and the governor signed it, it would never be effective, right? Wrong. This is just a waste of ink and the mark of an amateur. Title I tells you that the bill becomes effective midnight the day the governor signs it. So that's not the only mark of an amateur in this bill. I just read the recall section in 3 GCA 1121. Now, Senator Nelson adds a new section to Title I of the Government Code. And Title I is titled Events Causing Vacancy in the Municipal Office of Mayor and Vice Mayor. And here they are: death, declaration of mental incompetence, resignation, refusal or failure to assume office, the decision of a competent tribunal declaring void his election, conviction of a felony, his change of it says his or her change of residence. I'll have to correct that on the air here. Their change of residency from the municipality in which they were elected. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to be conjoined twins to be a mayor, but it kind of suggests it. When an incumbent is incapacitated because of illness and unable to continue for the remainder of the term. I, when an incumbent is sought in one re-election to another office. And then Nelson adds J. The results of a recall election in accordance with Section 121, if in favor of removal of the incumbent. So Nelson has added a section to Title I that says that if a mayor is recalled, his office is vacant. We wouldn't have known that just from the fact that he's removed from office. So if Nelson's bill passes and more than 2/3 of the good folks of Jonia vote for recall, he would actually be recalled twice. Once because of Section 121 and then once because of Nelson's new law. Now, I don't know what the effect of being removed from office twice is. Does that mean that we get to, since there's 2 vacancies, do we get to elect 2 mayors out there in Jonia? Or does it mean that Jesse should feel twice as bad as if he'd only been if his office has only been vacant once? I wonder how this happens. You know, the legislature, if you examined it in industrial terms, the legislature is the law factory of the government of Guam. You'd never know it sometimes from all of the extraneous stuff they do, like marriages, funerals, resolutions, etc. But it is the law factory. So I'll come back to this, but right now I have a very distinguished guest online here, someone who has sat behind this microphone himself and expounded on important subjects. Good afternoon, Daryl.
Good afternoon, Bob. And also a veteran of the law factory.
Okay.
An industrialist myself.
Having toiled in the law factory, all right?
I had the distinct honor of being complimented by the legislative council on how clean my bills were, that he didn't have to do anything to tweak them, and that was high praise.
Okay.
I just want to say I am shocked about the way that Selena's bill came out, because since there's already a provision, all they have to do is, follow the law. But nobody seems to want to follow the law, and but what I'm more concerned with is that I kind of wish that the legislature would take a good hard look at how well Jonya is faring without a mayor, and figure out whether they might be able to save $10 or $12 million a year by abolishing mayors. Because of the example of Jonya, just restructure the government of Guam to make sure that we can cover the bases and not have to conduct mayoral elections and have mayors, and just have maybe almost like an ombudsman staff of one or two in each village that answers back to governor's village representative or something, and deploy the agencies as they should be deployed to provide services that should be provided, not the ones that could be provided by, say, a funeral home or you know what I mean.
That's a good point, Daryl, because, are you outside, Daryl?
Yeah, I'm just walking into one of the better-known retail stores here on island, and I'm just about to. Okay, I'm sorry. Was that the wind?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry about that.
Okay. So
Okay,
I've had the same thought, because it seems to me if the mayors have a function, it is to be the linkage between people in the villages and the administration. So
Yeah.
if a road needs fixed, it would be the mayor who goes down to the Department of Public Works and pounds on the director's table and says, fix this road. That is if the mayor can't fix it himself.
Well, but why should the mayor be fixing roads? Why should the mayor have to tell Public Works that there's a road needs fixing? Because he's not going to fix it. He doesn't have the stuff to fix it efficiently. There should already be a crew that goes out and fixes roads, or inspects them, or has them on a schedule, and makes sure that the maintenance is done. But instead, they wait to find out who's the squeakiest wheel, and then they allocate road fixing resources according to the mayor that's going to scream the loudest, or has a village fiesta coming up, or these are not routine government activities anymore. They're discretionary. We got to get away from this. We'll give you government services on a discretionary basis.
Yeah,
that's almost a definition of corruption.
Good points, Daryl. And while we're at it, I don't know why we have to have a mayor's council. If mayors are the only local government officials we have, why do they have to have a council and act like a quasi-parliamentary body? It doesn't make sense, does it?
Well, it could make sense if they were part of like a lower house of the legislature, but they're not.
No.
And in fact, the funds going for the mayor's council would be the same funds that would go to coordinating whoever the village representatives would be. But you could take an objective look at the functions of the mayor's council and find where how many of them could be returned to the agencies that have the statutory responsibility and the funding and the staffing to carry them out, and just return them to those agencies and save a lot of money. And if you still needed village level residency confirmation or something like that, we have a census coming up. Why not just tie back to the census data and say, yeah, I moved into this house, or this house is being rented to me now, or something. It's just a lot of money. I think it's $28 million a year that's allocated to the mayor's council, and if we could save half of that by restructuring the mayor's council functions into line agency functions and governor's office direction, we'd be ahead of the game by half. And that's the legislature's function. They're supposed to look at things like this and find ways to save money year to year and restructure the government of Guam, but they're just not doing it. And trying to write a law to recall a mayor when there's already a law is just, looking in the wrong direction.
I agree, Daryl. Good insights. Thank you very much for sharing them. Thank you again.
I wanted to thank you for letting me get on the air this year. Before as we finish up 2019, it's been a blast, and I've been listening. I just don't call in, or I'm not going online, but I really love hearing from all of the regular callers and the folks online making their comments. I've been following it, and it just really, I consider everyone, these are all my friends, on listening to your show. So, and for you, thank you so much.
Okay,
for,
Daryl.
letting me come on the air this past year.
Okay, Daryl. Happy New Year. Short break.
Live the balanced lifestyle. Take Care Insurance offers proven wellness and fitness programs to encourage individuals and families to live a healthy, balanced lifestyle through preventative care, being active, eating right, relaxing and unwinding, and being socially connected. They have the island's largest offering of free fitness classes and health education programs for all ages. Join the movement. Follow them on Facebook and Instagram, or visit takecareasia.com to learn more.
As the busy holiday season approaches, the last thing on your mind is to visit your medical provider. At American Medical Center, we put your health first. A preventative visit will ensure a healthy holiday season. Call 647-8262, and together we can address any concerns you may have and make certain all your medications are current. From our family to yours, happy holidays from American Medical Center, your partner in healthcare.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific. Banking on the Pacific for 65 years.
Okay, so here we are back again a few minutes before our big halftime show, and I'm working with Nelson versus Bora. Before we entertain Daryl Taggarty, who has guest hosted here on Tall Tales, I was talking about the legislature. In a sense, if we used an industrial analysis, the legislature is the law factory. And you'd think they would have some very skilled technicians and engineers down there at the law factory who would turn out quality products every time. Instead, we get stuff like this, adding an unnecessary sections of the law, and the stuff that to me is such an obvious tip-off that the person who's drafting the bill doesn't know what he's doing. The inclusion of an effective date. Here's Section 4 of Nelson's bill. Effective date. This act shall be effective upon enactment. It just shows the person who did this didn't know what they are doing, because Title I has a section that says bills are effective midnight the day they're assigned. So unless you want a delayed effective date, you don't need a section called effective date. Sometimes you have a bill that says Section 1 of this act shall be effective 90 days after enactment. Section 2 of this act shall be effective July 4th, 2020. That makes sense. But just to say effective upon enactment, it might as well be have a note on the front underneath where the sponsor initials say, I don't know what I'm doing. And that's exactly what's the case here with Nelson's bill. So the bill is certainly necessary because we don't have a mayor in Jonia, and we're not going to have a mayor in Jonia unless Nelson votes unless Nelson's bill passes. However, leave it to Daryl. Daryl comes up with a good point. Maybe we can learn something from the fact that we don't have a mayor in Jonia. How bad was it? What important work that should have been done didn't get done? Maybe the mayor's office wasn't available for checker games or games of solitaire or something like that. What ought to happen didn't happen without a mayor. And Daryl says maybe we ought to do away with mayors, take the money, and the people and put them in the functional parts of the government of Guam to do the jobs that need to be done. And I chimed in by saying, and we could do away with the mayor's council, which is a quasi-parliamentary body, which is completely unnecessary if you assume that mayors are the only local officials we have. We don't need local officials sitting on a council that does Liberation Day parades and cockfights and carnivals and stuff like that. So this may be a really good time to just take a look at the whole thing. Now, of course, going back to today's editorial in the Post about having good ideas, that would be a good idea, but you know why it probably won't happen? Because too many of those in the political class think, I don't want to do away with mayors, because mayors are important parts of my political machine. So when winning na election, Gatson. So a lot of politicals would be reluctant to do away with the mayors because they think they can build on their own power base by sucking up to the mayors and magnify their own political power. But I think it's an idea whose time has come, and Daryl has a very shrewd observation here. This would be a really good time to decide, do we really need mayors? Okay, next item on the card here. We got about 4 minutes before the big halftime show, and I guess I could start out with the next item on the card. I don't think I can finish it, but it's the CCU versus 2020 Anno Domini. And the thing that prompts me to bring the... Probably we spent more time during 2019 talking about the CCU and their screw-ups than just about any other subject. Don't you think, Real Joe Cruz?
Yes, sir.
CCU was the gift that kept on giving. So you'll recall that it came to pass that in November of 2018, the CCU met an executive session and gave large salary increases to management officials, $25,000 to John Beneventi, and bonuses and large salary increases to 2 lawyers who sat in the executive session. This slid by under the radar because the nice thing about an executive session is nobody knows about it, right? Until there was an announcement in the paper that the salaries had been increased in an executive session. Whereupon a news bloodhound sniffed up that word executive session and started doing some FOIAing. And as the story unwound, it became obvious that the CCU had violated the law by giving raises, by discussing raises in executive session. It's not that you can't. It's not just that you can't give a raise in executive session. You can't even discuss salary in executive session. Okay, well, let's come back from that big halftime show, and we'll go right straight back to the CCU.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam. 93.3 FM, and 104.3 HD3.
Gathering in Texas to pray. I'm Carmen Roberts, Fox News. More than 100 people gathered for a vigil Monday night to remember the 2 victims of the Texas church shooting and to say evil did not win.
Tragedy is a word that's often used and a word that nobody wants to hear or say. We all know what it brings. We all know its effects, that it affects us all in different ways.
Pastor Britt Farmer with the West Freeway Church of Christ in the town of White Settlement. A church member and voluntary security guard, Jack Wilson, fatally shot the gunman, Keith Knoonan, seconds after he opened fire on Sunday. New York State Attorney General Letitia James says the man accused of attacking several people in a rabbi's home during Hanukkah won't get leniency, nor will anyone else who commits a hate crime.
New York State is a state where anti-Semitism or any other type of hate will not be tolerated by anyone, period.
Police found journals belonging to 37-year-old Grafton Thomas that contained anti-Semitic writings. His attorneys say doctors have treated Thomas for mental illness. Wildfires burning in Australia trapped thousands of people who waited too long to evacuate. About 4,000 residents of the seaside town of Malakuta had to run to the waterside today as winds pushed an emergency-level wildfire towards their homes. Victoria state authorities say that they will try to evacuate those people by sea. And Nissan's former chairman, Carlos Ghosn, surprisingly shows up in Lebanon while out on bail in Japan, where he was waiting trial for alleged financial misconduct. Ghosn says this morning that he's not fleeing justice, rather just seeking to avoid what he calls injustice and political persecution in Japan. America's listening to Fox News.
Yikes, are those Christmas bills coming in already? Those high-interest credit cards at 16, 18, even 24%? Well, we have a New Year's solution for you. A Bank Pacific personal loan with rates as low as 4.65% to pay off those expensive credit cards. It's easy, it's fast, and it's as low as 4.65% APR.
Bank Pacific, where others put branches, we place roots.
Equal credit opportunity lender as low as 4.65%. Conditions apply.
Water. It covers nearly 3/4 of our Earth. From vast oceans to millions of rivers and streams. We're all concerned with protecting our world's water, but none is more important than the water you and your family drink and use throughout your home. A Connecticut water treatment system can improve your water so that your family is using the best water in the world. Connecticut, for refreshing ideas on water.
American Water Tech, a passion for improving lives through better water.
Senator Bernie Sanders gets a clean bill of health from 3 doctors following his heart attack earlier this year.
Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders released letters from 3 doctors concluding the 78-year-old is fit enough to serve as president. Sanders was rushed to a hospital in October for chest pains. His campaign later confirmed the candidate suffered a heart attack. This month, Sanders underwent stress test and EKG monitoring with a cardiologist, writing Sanders was able to exercise to a level approximately 50% higher than men his age with a similar diagnosis. In Washington, Jared Halpern, Fox News.
President Trump signs an anti-robocall law that's expected to help Americans deal with the torrent of unwanted calls, promising everything from lower interest rates to pretending to be the IRS. A lawsuit filed Monday in state court in San Francisco alleges a Jesuit priest with ties to Mother Teresa sexually abused an American boy more than 1,000 times. That boy, now a man, Robert Goldberg, claims that he suffered abuse from age 11 into adulthood from then-priest Donald McGuire, who has since died. A Georgia Tech football recruit dies after an early morning accident.
Officials in Broward County, Florida, confirming the death of Bryce Gowdy early Monday morning in his hometown of Deerfield Beach. According to authorities, Gowdy was struck by a freight train rushed to a nearby hospital where he later passed away. Gowdy signed with the Georgia Tech football team earlier this month and was set to enroll in school next week. The 4-star recruit was one of the top-rated players coming into the Yellow Jackets football program. Georgia Tech head coach Jeff Collins calling the incoming receiver, quote, an outstanding young man with a very bright future, end quote, in a statement Monday. Bryce Gowdy was 17 years old. Matt Napolitano, Fox News.
And stocks ended broadly lower on Monday. The Dow dived 183 points. I'm Carmen Roberts. This is Fox News.
In life, we all have the ability to make a difference, to make an impact on someone's life. As we look around us, time never stops, but we are filled with endless moments of gratitude. The art of giving is incorporated in so many different ways. At Guam Gift Baskets, we want to be able to express your gratitude and love to those who you care about. Show your appreciation with a gift made with love this holiday season. Visit our website at guamgiftbaskets.com. See the smiles, touch their hearts, feel the experience.
Begin 2020 in style at Hyatt Regency Guam Resort. Party into the new year with entertainment and beachside views of the Tumon Bay fireworks at the New Year's Eve Countdown Party beginning at 10 p.m. Join the party early at 6 p.m. for Breeze's Dinner Buffet, a Polynesian and fire dance show, and get entry and free-flowing drinks at the New Year's Eve Countdown Party. For information about bottle service options or to make a reservation, please call 647-1234.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific, banking on the Pacific for 65 years.
Another terrific halftime show here on Tall Tales. It gets better every day. So here we are, the second half of Tall Tales, the final Tall Tales of 2019. What a memorable day. So I was talking about the CCU and how it turned out that they had given illegal raises because they discussed raises in an executive session with the bosses and two lawyers present during the executive session. They were found out. The Attorney General says, "You broke the law, guys. You got to take the money back." Well, they dithered and dithered and dithered, and they're still dithering, trying to figure out how to take the money back. So they were quick to hand it out, somewhat slow to take it back. And then, after that, then people wanted to see the minutes of that executive session, and they wanted to listen to the transcription of the executive session. But the chairman of the CCU, Joey Duenas, decided he would play hardball. He said, "I'm not going to give those, no. And instead of fully disclosing, figuring out what had happened and making it right, they dragged it out and kept it on the skyline for a couple of months until finally 3 of the commissioners voted, turn those records over, make them public. Had that been done immediately when the illegal meeting was found, had they immediately upon discovery of the illegal meeting said, yes, we now know that we broke the law, we will forthwith recover the money that we paid out illegally. We will make the transcription and the minutes of the executive session immediately available. We will do the same for all future executive sessions. We learned a hard lesson here, but now we know better. If they had done that, they might not be the number 2 story for 2019. So the Daily Post did their top 10 for 2019, and the GPA, GWA managers' raises is the number 2 story. Well, and the story's not over yet because the public auditor, B.J. Cruz, caused an audit to be conducted of GPA and GWA and found that on 10 different occasions, raises were the law about raises in executive sessions was violated again, meaning that people have been drawing money from an illegal salary increase or an illegal bonus. So what is the CCU doing this time? Well, they've put in place procedures that would prevent this from happening again, right? No. They've taken immediate steps to recover the illegal payments, right? No. They have done nothing, right? Yeah, right. They haven't done anything at all. So I guess they're waiting for another public bloodbath, another public bloodbath where they reduce their credibility even further by having been told what they did wrong, having even been given a price tag of what they did wrong, and now are not going to do anything at all, hoping that it just goes away. This is sad because the CCU has, if an agency needs credibility, it's that one, because they make really important decisions involving large amounts of money. And they take enough criticism as it is on matters where they are probably operating in a diligent fashion. Like Clint Rogel has been all over them because they can't snap their fingers and go from burning oil to a completely solar-powered operation. So they're going to take a lot of heat from the environmental wackos as time goes on. They took some heat on the location of their new power plant, the fact that they're building an oil-burning power plant instead of going with something that's renewable energy. So they already have enough on their plate with respect to credibility. So what they need to do is they need to scrupulously guard their credibility on all of these non-power generation matters. They can't afford to squander their credibility like they did with this salary increase thing, where they made a mistake and then doubled down by playing hide the ball. So looking forward, make a New Year's resolution, CCU. You know you screwed up. You screwed up 10 times. The public auditor has told you that. He's given you a price tag. Immediately announce that you're going to recover the money back that was illegally paid out. And recover it back right away. Don't take 8 years to do it. And then set yourself some provisions in place to guard against doing the same thing again. And think in terms of the legal advice you're getting. You know, you got horrible legal advice in November of 2018. You had 2 lawyers sitting in your executive session condoning what you did, which was clearly illegal, and benefiting themselves by getting large salary increases. And then one of those lawyers took it upon himself, obviously part of the international radio listening audience who didn't like the show, and wrote a nasty, threatening letter to the host of Tall Tales, to me. Now, is that what we expect agency counsel to do? To go out and pick fights with radio talk show hosts? And what he said was, if I mentioned his evaluation, he would sue me. Well, it turned out that his own commission made that evaluation public. So CCU, you got some really serious house cleaning to do. And you need to do it now. And you need to think in terms of restoring your credibility so that you won't have pissed it all away on matters that don't even relate to mission accomplishment. Congratulations on being the #2 story for 2019. All right, so next I've got Mark Chotfrus. Mark Chotfris versus GPD. And you'll recall that Mark Chotfris was the Deputy Chief of Police, police commander. And a couple Christmases ago, he went down to Agate, and he got in trouble by the way he dealt with some of his officers. He was disciplined, and he was told to keep his mouth shut. Then he went out and talked to the media, and he got fired. And not only that, but criminal charges were brought against him for obstructing governmental functions, official misconduct, two things, obstruction governmental functions and official misconduct for what we'll refer to as his agate performance. So he was charged criminally and fired. Now, the Superior Court, Judge Maria Senzon, has dismissed the case against Chotfris. She has dismissed it with prejudice, meaning that the case can't be brought again. And here's what happened. When the trial began, the prosecuting attorney made... let me see if I can. I have the decision here. It's a interesting decision. Yeah, during direct examination of the people's first witness, the prosecutor elicited testimony attempting to make a connection between the defendant and the Agate Bloodtown gang. Defendant raised multiple objections to this testimony, asserting that it was more prejudicial than probative, and if it had any probative value, it was subject to scrutiny under Guam Rules of Evidence 404B, and therefore inadmissible. And then defense counsel moved for a mistrial. Now, unpacking all of that, Rule 404B has a requirement that if the prosecution is going to attempt to use character evidence, it has to give defense notice of that. And in the absence of the notice, you can't do it. And the character evidence is to show that a defendant has certain tendencies, not that he necessarily acted therewith, but there is a test for this kind of evidence, and that is that the judge must decide that its probative value outweighs its credibility. Would you give the law and order signal here, Real Joe Cruz? You may do that sua sponte from now on. Thank you. Yeah, so that was counsel's motion. Counsel said he didn't follow the rules, and besides that, the criminal charges don't charge him with being a gang member or anything like that. So to bring that on now just prejudices the jury against my defendant, and it isn't probative. It doesn't help the jury understand what really happened. And he said, I can't get a fair trial now that that testimony has been elicited. I move for a mistrial. And Judge Senzon granted the mistrial. Now, a mistrial means that the case, in effect, is dismissed, but that the prosecution can bring that same case again. It happens all the time. There was a mistrial in the Tory case for a different reason, but because of a hung jury. But Tory's going on into his second trial here next year. So ordinarily, when there's a mistrial, the prosecution can bring the case back to court again. But there's a very narrow exception to that rule, and that is that if the mistrial is caused by the prosecution's severe misconduct, the case can be dismissed with prejudice. And that's exactly what happened here. So Judge Senzon, on the motion of defense counsel, the The judge said, in granting the defendant's motion for a mistrial, the court rejected all arguments made by the people. This court finds that the inconsistent statements made by the people regarding their attempt to introduce what this court has already found to be clearly inadmissible character evidence. Further, the court finds that the people attempted to circumvent the court's admonitions against introducing evidence of gang affiliation at least 2 separate times on the record. Finally, the court finds that the defense people's refusal to file requisite notice of intent to introduce 404B lends to its finding that the people actually intended to use such evidence for an impermissible purpose at trial. The people's actions go much farther than a single question and constitute a sequence of intentional overreaching. Conclusion. For the reasons stated above, this court finds that under the circumstances, the prosecutor's conduct at trial was intended to goad the defendant into seeking a mistrial. Further, the court finds that this was done in order for the prosecution to seek more favorable opportunity to prosecute the defendant. Having failed to comply with Rule 404B, the people knew that the defendant's due process rights were effectively denied and that a conviction under the circumstances would be sound basis for a reversal of any convictions. For these reasons, the court finds that under the very special circumstances of this case and the conduct of the prosecutor in ignoring admonitions of the court not to elicit gang affiliation testimony, the narrow exception to the Kennedy rule for double jeopardy applies, and the people are barred from retrying this motion. For the foregoing reasons, the defendant's motion to dismiss for double jeopardy is granted. The above matter against defendant is hereby dismissed with prejudice. Okay, so what it means is Chotfris was found innocent, right? He was cleared. Wrong. Doesn't find anything at all to that effect. The judge didn't speak at all to Chotfris's guilt or innocence. What the court said was the prosecutor's misconduct was so severe that case is dismissed with prejudice. Not that Chotfris was guilty. So I suppose the boys down at McDonald's are going to say, oh, yeah, he got off on a technicality. Well, it was pretty serious, so I don't know that I would classify it as a technicality. But a lot of people think that a technicality is anything other than a jury verdict of not guilty. So this brings us right back to, well, since he was innocent, I guess he gets his job back now, right? Because you're innocent until proven guilty. How many times have we heard that, Real Joe Cruz?
10 billion, sir.
Yeah, you know, the 2 ladies out at Public Health who were caught misbehaving in their own programs were not fired. They were given other duties. The police, an employee of the police department stole from the police department, attempted to pay the money back with a bad check, was transferred to the Department of Corrections, and was allowed to continue on the job after she pled guilty and was sentenced. Well, guilty until proven innocent until proven guilty, right? The mayor of Jonia, some of the coverage of the mayor of Jonia. Well, you know, the citizen of Jonia out there trying to get signatures on his recall petition is having some trouble because some people are saying, well, you know, the mayor's innocent until proven guilty. So this case really demonstrates what I've been trying to tell you all along. Pending criminal charges are not a job protection program. So in the story here that covers this, it winds up by saying the prosecution contends there were no grounds for a mistrial and they did not force the defense to move for one. However, the court in its order found that Chotfris's due process rights were denied. And then Chotfris continues to fight to get his job back with the police department. He is scheduled to appear before the Civil Service Commission in February 2020. So the fact that he got out from the criminal charge does not mean he gets his job back. It doesn't even come close. So it could very well be that the Civil Service Commission is going to say, no, Charlie, you don't get your job back. We don't care about the dismissal of your criminal case because of prosecutorial misconduct. It has nothing to do with what's going on before the Civil Service Commission. So that's Mark Chotfris. And here's what he says. Former Guam Police Colonel Mark Chotfris said he is happy to have been cleared of the charges against him in the Superior Court of Guam. Cleared of the charges. And then he says, the truth will always prevail. Yeah, well, in this case, it wasn't the truth that prevailed. It was the skill of your lawyer in pouncing on prosecutorial misconduct. It didn't have anything to do with the truth. And the truth could very well prevail before the Civil Service Commission, and you don't get your job back. But, you know, these myths become so deeply ingrained, Real Joe Cruz, he's innocent until proven guilty, that they take on a life of their own. And they're a classic example of a little knowledge being a dangerous thing. A little knowledge is a dangerous thing. A little bit more sometimes can be catastrophic. Okay, next item on the card is Animal Lives Matter versus Sabina Paris. And there's a story here, advocates seek action on criminal cruelty bill. A local animal welfare group is questioning the lack of attention given to a bill introduced earlier this year that would strengthen animal cruelty laws on Guam. I'm asking for our leaders, our government, to start taking animal cruelty seriously, Tina Marie Guzman said in a press release in which she asks about the status of Bill 185, also known as the PUGWA Act. Now, Real Joe Cruz, this is not an act to make chewing PUGWA illegal.
I hope not.
Yeah, so just relax. You know, it's not a law that's saying PUGWA is just as bad as cannabis. That's not the point. PUGWA was the name of a dog that was killed.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Just thought I'd give you a little comfort on that one.
Thank you, sir.
Cruz. Yeah. The bill was named after a pet dog that was shot to death at a Jigo home. Guzman helped start a local group that initially aimed to help pet owners find their missing pets. Our group has now evolved into a rescue group for neglected, abandoned, injured strays, and in some cases, owned pets. The group also has held roadside waves to increase awareness about animal cruelty on Guam. Animal cruelty. Now, you know where I'm going to go with this, don't you, Real Joe Cruz?
Cockfighting, sir?
Animal cruel. Are cocks animals?
Gazaneros.
Are the Godzilla? Are they animals?
Yes.
Uh-huh. Is letting them cut each other up with big knives, is that cruelty?
I think so.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's see how Tina Guzman is going to react to that. On a daily basis, our group receives messages from concerned citizens and animal lovers. And Guzman said, I am reaching out on behalf of the entire animal community for answers, for resolution, for strict laws. Now, Senator Sabina Paris introduced Bill 185 in July. And we've covered that quite extensively here on Tall Tales. It's a 36-page bill. It is very far-reaching, and it's well drafted. You know, unlike some of the things that we comment on here. It's well drafted, comprehensive, very strict. Okay, so we're coming up on the 7th inning stretch here. We'll go right back to being kind to animals in just a minute, right after the 7th inning stretch.
If you've ever struggled for breath, you know what a scary experience it is. Whether you have asthma, emphysema, COPD, lung cancer, or another respiratory illness, the right medical treatment makes all the difference. GRMC's Pulmonology Clinic has the latest technology and respiratory equipment, staffed by world-class pulmonologists. Make an appointment today with GRMC's Pulmonology Clinic and start breathing easier. GRMC, where patients are partners.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Mescla. Try their featured special for December. Kahlua pork and cabbage, slow-roasted smoke-laced pork, shredded and sautéed with onions and cabbage, served with steamed rice and lomi salmon. Try it today. Available in Agotnya and in Tumon at the Grand Plaza Hotel. For reservations, please call 969-2652.
Center field bleachers, Wrigley Field. Did you notice that little puppy out there, Real Joe Cruz?
I did, sir.
Yeah. Did you notice how I picked it up and petted it?
Yeah, that was sweet of you, sir.
Yeah,
You're very kind.
I am a dog lover. I am always kind to animals. I want to make sure that that record reflects that. So Sabina Paris introduced Bill 185 in July. What month is it now?
December, sir.
December, almost January. So she introduced the bill in July. Now, I could see why Tina Marie Guzman is saying, hey, what happened here? How about our bill? And here's the answer. The bill was referred by the Rules Committee in October. Introduced in July, referred in October to the Committee on Health, Tourism, and other things. Senator Therese Trelai is the chairman of that committee, according to her staff. The bill had been scheduled for a public hearing, but was pushed back at Paris's request. Now, why would Paris ask that her bill not come on for public hearing? And then the article says that the committee is now working to schedule it for January. Now, this is, in fact, I would say the bill it's overreaching, because it says that people who are convicted of various crimes of animal abuse, sentenced to jail, are sentenced to prison. When they get out of prison, they have to go for mental counseling, mental health counseling. It's pretty draconian. So why do you suppose that Sabina Paris would ask that her bill not come on for public hearing? Oh, yeah, and as far as the thoroughness of the bill is concerned, the bill even criminalizes bestiality for the first time in the history of the island. Bestiality. It's pretty comprehensive. I don't know if I don't know if any of the pro-bestiality folks on the island are going to come down and testify against the bill. I'm going to be watching that one like a hawk, as it were. Yeah, so I wonder if the flap over cockfighting had anything to do with this, because as we all know, last December 20, U.S. Congress passed a law that said cockfighting is animal cruelty and illegal in the territories, and has some really stiff penalties. It's not something to be trifled with. Now, Sabina is, really concerned about animals, and she's got this really strongly worded bill. It's just really tough on people who'd be cruel to animals. Only one little exception, though, just one little one, and that is cockfighting. So there's language in Paris's bill that said cockfighting conducted in accordance with the laws of Guam is an exception to that cruelty to animals bill. It doesn't say that cockfighting is not cruel. It just says you aren't going to get punished for doing it if you do it in accordance with the laws of Guam. But here's catch-22. A story a Kevin Kerrigan story a year ago quoted a member of the Cockpit Licensing Board saying, we haven't licensed any cockpit boards, any cockfights for 10 years. And an interview at RevTax said, we don't collect those taxes at all. So, and then the last of the members of the Cockpit Licensing Board resigned a couple months ago. So the upshot here is there can be no legal cockfights on Guam. We care so much about it that we let our own regulatory mechanisms just fall apart. That's how important it is to the culture. So, Sabina, are you going to amend your bill to clarify, to make it clear that a cockfight, even if not in accordance with the laws of Guam, is still okay, is still an exception to your bill? Or are you going to leave the bill as it is, knowing that cockfighters could be punished under Guam law? Knowing that stateside outfit AWA is going to offer rewards for people who unearth illegal cockfights. And knowing that loudmouths on the radio, if a report of an illegal cockfight is made, is going to say, what are our local authorities doing about this? It's not exempt under the Sabina Paris law. How about it, Sabina? What are you going to do? Just fold your hands and say, well, that's not what I meant? So it's going to be really interesting to watch if this bill ever comes on for public hearing. The word cognitive dissonance comes into play here. Cognitive dissonance means having to take two inconsistent positions at the same time. As an example, let's say that a person says, I am a really honest man. I never take anything that doesn't belong for me. Sir, don't you, when you come home from work, don't you walk through that orchard over there? Oh, yeah, every day. I see you when you walk through that orchard. You're always picking apples off the tree and putting them in that bag that you carry. Aren't you stealing apples? And didn't you just tell me that you never steal anything? Aren't you stealing apples? I got to go to work. That's an example of cognitive dissonance. When you think you adhere to a particular ideal, but your conduct betrays you. So your cognitive dissonance here, Sabina Paris, is you're really out there fighting for the animals. You absolutely no animal cruelty, except for cockfighting. But now you're going to be hoist with your own petard, because there are no legal cockfights on Guam. So your exception does not accept out local gazaneros who are going to give you the Atan Baba, because they're going to say, you didn't take care of us. And it's part of our culture, and we've been doing it ever since, and we learned it on and on and on, that whole rap. So you're going to find yourself in a very uncomfortable position here, Sabina Paris. Maybe that's why Tina Marie Guzman is wondering, whatever happened to Bill 185? An interesting story. Okay, that's so much for Animal Lives Matter versus Sabina Paris. And now we're going to go back to CLTC versus, it was USA versus CLTC first, but I'm bringing it back here, and I have recaptioned it, the CLTC versus Chamorros. Now, background here, you know that in 1975, Senator Paul Berdallo introduced a bill called the Chamorro Land Trust Act. And what that bill did was it identified all government property as potentially available for long-term leases to Chamorros. Now, most of the government of Guam's property came from the naval government. When the Organic Act passed in 1950, most naval government property became property of the government of Guam. So most of that property then was designated available lands and available for long-term lease to Chamorros, 99-year leases to Chamorros. I remember when this happened. It was sold as something to help Chamorros. That was the animus. This was a pro-Chamorro bill. This was for Chamorros. And the idea was that by making these grants long-term leases, 99-year leases, the enactors of the statute could be sure that there would always be land on Guam owned by Chamorros, no matter how many outsiders came in, no matter how commercialized the island became. There would always be land on Guam owned by or under the control of Chamorros. Nobody ever said any other reason for enacting that statute. As a matter of fact, very recently, Senator B.J. Cruz attempted to amend the law saying that people who held those leases could, under certain circumstances, be granted fee simple title to the real property. And the nationalists went through the roof, said, you can't do that, BJ. You're destroying the purpose of the Chamorro Land Trust, which is to be sure that there are always Chamorros who own land on Guam. So BJ backed off. So after the Chamorro Land Trust Act was passed, and by the way, if you want to be on the Chamorro Land Trust Commission, guess what? You got to be Chamorro. Yeah. And if you want to be the director of the Chamorro Land Trust, the administrator, guess what? You got to be Chamorro. But there's nothing racist about any of this thing. So that's how it was structured in the beginning. And the word was Chamorro was prominent in the statute until Rice versus Cayetano came along, and then there was people got out their word processors and turned on the search and replace feature, and search for the word Chamorro and replaced it with native inhabitant, hoping to immunize it from the rule in Rice versus Cayetano. So as time went on, leases were granted in an extremely awkward fashion. A huge scandal here recently when it turned out that leases were being given to relatives of employees. When Michael Bora, the executive director, signed a lease in two places, both as a director and the grantor and as a lessee. It just went on and on and on. Yeah, it was pretty stunning. It took a little pressure off the CCU for a while. It was even worse in the CCU. But anyhow, that's the thrust of it, to give long-term leases to people, to Chamorros. But then someone who was not a Chamorro applied for a lease, and was turned down, and he ratted out the Chamorro Land Trust Commission to the fair housing part of the Department of Justice. The Department of Justice then filed suit, says you are discriminating against people for an impermissible reason, race. And suit was filed. The suit came on for summary judgment. The judge who heard the suit tipped her hand by saying, you know, I really like you guys to settle this suit. And she really took to the argument advanced by the government of Guam for the first time. For the first time, the government of Guam said that the purpose of this act was to make whole people who had lost their lands to condemnation by the United States government. That was the purpose of the law. Now, this is quite a flip-flop for the government of Guam, because in the first Chamorro Land Trust suit, when B.J. Cruz decided the case brought by Angel Santos, the government of Guam defended against Angel Santos' suit by saying the law is unconstitutional because it's racially discriminatory. I've got to translate this into Latin and make it into a Latin maxim, but the phrase is, how do we explain that? Well, that was then, but this is now. And our position has evolved. So when the government of Guam made that argument that the purpose of the Chamorro Land Trust Act was to make whole those who had their land taken by the United States government in eminent domain, the judge tipped her hat to it and said, I'd really like to see you guys settle. So settlement negotiations began. And as I mentioned, this is the first time anybody talked about condemnation. And while we're talking about eminent domain, somebody ought to get a hold of Robert Ripley and believe it or not. Because here's the believe it or not. People who had their land taken by eminent domain here in the island of Guam were paid for the land twice. First, when the land was condemned, and then second, in 1978, when Mr. Wanpat got a bill through Congress to provide more compensation to those people. So they got paid for the land twice, and then a lot of them got the land back. This sounds like something that Bernie Madoff would have been selling. You know, you invest in this real property over here, and the dividends will amount to you getting paid for the land twice. And then the return of principal, it's kind of like a bond, return of principal will be when you get the land back. But the government of Guam is proceeding on the basis that the purpose of the Chamorro Land Trust was to make whole those who lost, whose land was taken in eminent domain. And a note about eminent domain. I pointed this out to Kellis the other day. If you go to the Fifth Amendment to the United States Constitution, you find this language. Nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. Now, that's not a grant of authority. That just says that if the United States government takes your property, they have to provide you with just compensation. And how you figure out just compensation is extremely complicated. You know, so lawyers make a whole career out of determining what just compensation is and making that argument in court. So if the Constitution didn't grant the United States the power of eminent domain, where did it come from? And the answer is it's an incident of sovereignty. Every sovereign nation has the power of eminent domain. It goes back to, it goes back beyond the days of kings and queens to the feudal times, when the Lord owned the land and there were various kinds of tenancy on the land. But without going into a long lesson on English history, well, I guess we had to go into Spanish history, too, since we got a little bit of the habanera playing here. Thanks, Real Joe Cruz. And let's see, I've got our Carl on the line. So we're going to come back on the home stretch and entertain our Carl.
Rent, lease. What does Horizon do for you? Here's a clue. Advertising, marketing, screening, inspecting, instructing, leasing and signing, collecting and complying, inquiring and assessing, coordinating, repairing, renewing, enforcing, evicting, moving, cleaning, rekeying, communicating. Do it yourself and you'll find it taxing. We work hard to keep the vacancies low, so at the end of the month, you collect the dough. Proven and trusted. Horizon Properties. We do it all. 777-7792.
Are you ready for some football? The Ray Gibson Show has got your fix every day with the Points NFL Pick'em contest. Get the latest updates as we check out the past week's performance and break down the upcoming action. Get your game on by calling the hotline at 888-TALK or sound off on Facebook Live at thepoint.gu. League members get a chance to win some awesome weekly prizes with a shot for your choice of a new GTA phone. The NFL Pick'em contest is brought to you by Current Guam with special thanks to GTA. Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific, banking on the Pacific for 65 years.
So here we are, grandstand, Kentucky Derby venue, Churchill Downs, Louisville, Kentucky. And who do I see occupying a seat right next to me in that grandstand? Our Carl. Are you ready for the race, our Carl?
I'm ready.
All right, go for it.
Before I forget it, Happy New Year to you and Real Joe and everyone in your vast listening audience.
And by the way, let me just interrupt for a second about wishing the Real Joe Cruz a Happy New Year. You know, Real Joe Cruz, you've worked really hard this year. And every one of our international radio listening audience knows that it's never been easy to be the producer for Tall Tales. So, in recognition of your hard work and as an expression of my gratitude, this is what I'm going to do for you. You can have the rest of the year off.
Wow. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Oh, praise the Lord.
Yeah, you got to be kind to your coworkers, Real Joe. I mean, Real Carl, our Carl.
Yeah, no wonder why Real Joe loves working there.
Absolutely.
The perks are incredible.
They are.
Yeah, as far as the CLTC, the big problem I've had for some time is if they're going to do this, I really think that at some point they should have put something in the system where the Chamorros get that land free and clear. I have a cousin who her and her husband were deeded. They got one of these land trust, not deeds, but leases, and they fenced off the area beautifully. They put in, built concrete buildings, a lot of it with their own labor. They brought in fruit trees, chickens, dogs, did a fantastic job. And then at some point they were notified by the some people at CLTC that, you guys took someone else's place in line, so looks like you might lose your lease.
Yeah, well, Carl, I have spoken about this before, that land tenure is so important. It's very important that people be able to own real property. And if you mess up the alienability of land, it creates all kinds of problems. You can't borrow money against it. It's hard to convey clear title, etc., and so on.
Exactly. Some try to, put a smiley face on it, but it really has some serious problems. There's a short video put out by PragerU. It's titled something like American Indians are still getting a raw deal. And the speaker talks about the problems that the land trust system, the immense problems the land trust system has caused the American Indians. One video put out by John Stossel, they're driving through some of these reservations, and it's just filled with ramshackled houses and just a mess. It's just terrible condition. One exception to...
Carl, excuse me a second. Sounds really interesting, but I have an emergency, and I'm going to ask your leave to do something.
Oh, absolutely.
I've got Phil Flores holding, and Phil Flores is the sponsor of this program.
Okay, absolutely.
So I think I ought to...
I will listen.
Put him on the line, right? Thank you.
All right,
Carl.
yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Good afternoon, Philip.
You're a wild man. Hey, I'm just phoning at the end of the decade to say that I enjoy listening to you when I drive home every night. And Happy New Year, and I'm glad you're back and everything else. And it's really fun, your show. And I like how your competing show on 57 is Tony Lamarita, and we have the Republicans. And anyway, Bob, you're doing a great job, and have a great New Year to you and your family.
Well, thank you very much, Phil. And here at Tall Tales, the Real Joe Cruz and I really appreciate your sponsorship. So thank you very much, and Happy New Year.
And Happy New Year.
Thanks for banking on us, sir.
All right. So there we go. Probably should have kept the other Carl on the line for a minute, right? I had something from, if I didn't lose it, something from the poet laureate here. Yeah. It's time for, let's see, the poet laureate says the end of the year is finally here, so now we can breathe and relax. A new year has come, and we'll throw out the bum who has faltered and gone off the tracks. For the coming election needs thought and reflection before we head into the polls. So take care and be wise, for we truly despise the old political trolls. Okay, so our Carl is back. Okay, our Carl, thanks for your flexibility there.
No problem.
So anyhow, without giving me a book review here, the point that Stossel and Prager make is that the Indians' situation where the U.S. government owns the land and they are given tenancies on it is not a very good system, right?
No, it just caused the American Indians tremendous problems, and we see some of those happening locally.
Yeah, well, if you want to do something with property, it's extremely important that you be able to borrow money against the property. That's just kind of the way the system works. So we've decided, way back that free alienability to land was necessary for the well-being of citizens and for the prosperity of the country. So when we set up a system like this where there's no free alienability, regardless of how admirable we think the purpose is, it works against the people who were, quote, trying to help the most.
Yeah, exactly. My cousin and her husband had put a tremendous amount of sweat and money and time into that property, and I think they finally somehow worked it out. But imagine, living 99 years with that hanging over your head. What kind of incompetence or corruption are you going to be up against in those 99 years, you and your family? So, not a good thing.
True enough. Well, Carl, thanks a lot for calling. We'll be talking to you next year, I'm sure. And Real Joe Cruz, you got the rest of the year off. Everybody out there in our international radio listening audience, the Real Joe Cruz and I will see you next year. Adios.